Billionaire finalized the divorce until a Christmas Eve reconciliation revealed her twin pregnancy. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. And make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The December rain droomed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Seth Carrington's penthouse office, 43 floors above Manhattan. At 36, he commanded a private aviation empire worth $3 billion, but tonight, he sat motionless behind his mahogany desk, staring at a single sheet of paper, the divorce decree, final and binding, signed just hours ago via video call. Seth ran his fingers through his dark hair, the same gesture that once made Eden laugh and call him her brooding billionaire. Now there was no one left to tease him about his habits, no one to leave coffee rings on his pristine glass tables, no one to fill the suffocating silence of his perfectly organized life. His assistant Miranda knocked softly before entering. "Mr. Carrington, the board meeting notes are ready for your review." And she paused, noticing the paper in his hands. "Sir, perhaps you should head home early tonight." Seth's steel-gray eyes didn't move from the document. "Home," he repeated flatly. "Right." The penthouse awaited him 2 hours later, every surface gleaming, every book precisely aligned, every piece of art strategically placed. It was a monument to his success and a tomb for his happiness. He poured himself 2 fingers of 20-year-old scotch and stood before the massive windows overlooking Central Park. 3 months. It had been 3 months since Eden packed her bags and walked out of their life together. 3 months since she'd stood in this very room, tears streaming down her face, telling him she couldn't live with someone who treated love like a business transaction. "You measure everything, Seth," she had said, her voice breaking. "Every conversation, every gesture, every moment of affection. You're so afraid of losing control that you've forgotten how to actually live." He'd wanted to argue, to explain that control was what kept them safe, what kept their world stable, but the words had died in his throat as she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the marble countertop. Seth walked to his study and opened the wall safe, retrieving a small velvet box. Inside lay Eden's ring, the 5-carat emerald-cut diamond he'd chosen because it reminded him of her eyes. He'd never returned it to the jeweler, couldn't bring himself to erase that final connection. His phone buzzed with a text from his business partner. "Merry Christmas Eve, you workaholic. Take a break for once." Christmas Eve. He'd forgotten. Seth closed the ring box and returned to the living room. The scotch burned his throat, but it couldn't burn away the memory of Eden's laugh, the way she hummed while cooking breakfast, how she'd curl up against him during thunderstorms. Despite being the strongest person he knew, Eden Morell had been everything he wasn't: spontaneous where he was calculated, warm where he was reserved, hopeful where he was pragmatic. She was a brilliant attorney who could argue any case, but she'd never been able to argue him out of his emotional armor. The rain intensified and Seth found himself thinking about their first Christmas together. Eden had insisted on picking out their tree personally, dragging him to 3 different lots until she found the one. It had been lopsided and too tall for their living room, but she'd loved its imperfections. "Not everything has to be perfect to be beautiful, Seth," she'd told him, adjusting ornaments on crooked branches. He'd bought her a perfectly symmetrical designer tree the following year. She'd smiled and then thanked him, but something had dimmed in her eyes. Now, staring at his pristine, professionally decorated apartment, Seth realized he would trade everything for one more lopsided Christmas tree, one more morning of coffee rings on his tables, one more chance to choose love over control. The scotch glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. As he knelt to clean the mess, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Miranda's family Christmas dinner. Chaos, laughter, children running around a tiny apartment that probably cost less than his monthly wine bill. It looked like joy. Seth stood slowly, his decision crystallizing like ice in his chest. He grabbed his keys and coat, not bothering to finish cleaning the broken glass. For the first time in 3 months, he was going to do something completely unplanned, something that terrified him more than any hostile takeover or failed business deal. The Porsche's engine roared to life as he pulled out of the garage into the storm. He knew Eden's address by heart, had driven past her brownstone twice in the weeks after she left, never finding the courage to stop. Tonight felt different. Tonight, the suffocating perfection of his world had finally broken something inside him. The GPS showed 23 minutes to her neighborhood in Brooklyn. Seth gripped the steering wheel tighter, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't have a plan, didn't have the perfect words that might convince her to listen. All he had was the desperate need to tell her that he'd rather be imperfect with her than perfect alone. As he pulled onto Eden's tree-lined street, snow began mixing with the rain. The brownstones glowed with warm light, Christmas decorations twinkling in windows, the kind of homey neighborhood charm that his penthouse would never possess. He parked across from number 47 and sat in the car for a full minute, watching her windows. Soft light spilled from behind ghost curtains. She was home. Seth stepped out into the storm and crossed the street, each step feeling like a mile. He climbed the 3 stone steps to her front door, his expensive leather shoes slipping slightly on the wet surface. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What if she slammed the door in his face? What if she'd moved on? What if, before he could lose his nerve, he knocked? Footsteps approached from inside, slow and measured. The porch light flickered on, and Seth heard the soft click of the peephole cover being moved aside. A long pause, then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened, and Seth's world tilted on its axis. Eden stood before him, but everything was different. Her chestnut hair was longer, pulled back in a messy bun. Her face was fuller, glowing with a radiance he'd never seen before. And then his gaze dropped and his breath caught in his throat. She was pregnant, very unmistakably pregnant. Time seemed suspended as Seth stared at Eden's rounded belly, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The rain continued to fall behind him, but he no longer felt the cold droplets hitting his shoulders. Eden's voice was barely above a whisper, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her stomach. "What are you doing here?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. His gaze traveled from her belly to her face, taking in the subtle changes, the fuller cheeks, the exhaustion shadowing her green eyes, the way she held herself differently, protectively. He finally managed his voice. "Pregnant." "Yes." Eden stepped back slightly, but didn't close the door. 5 months. The math hit him like a physical blow. 5 months. September. She would have gotten pregnant just before she left him. Is it? He couldn't finish the question. Eden's expression hardened. "Yours? Of course it's yours. Seth, I left you. I didn't become someone else entirely." The sharp edge in her voice snapped him back to reality. He was standing on her doorstep, soaked from the rain, staring at his pregnant ex-wife like she was an apparition. This wasn't how he'd imagined their reunion, not that he'd actually imagined it going well. "Eden, I'm sorry, he ran his hand through his wet hair again. "Can we talk, please?" She studied his face for a long moment, and he saw something flicker in her expression. Surprise, maybe, at the vulnerability in his voice. The Seth she'd left had never said please about anything. "It's Christmas Eve," she said quietly. "What could possibly be so important that you're here now? After 3 months of nothing?" "Everything," he said, and the word came out raw, desperate. "Everything is important. I made a mistake, Eden, the biggest mistake of my life." She wrapped her arms around herself, the gesture emphasizing her changed silhouette. Which mistake would that be? There were so many. The words stung, but he deserved them. "Letting you leave, not fighting for us, thinking I could control love the same way I control everything else." Eden leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking exhausted. "Seth, we signed papers today. We're divorced. Whatever you think you want to say, it's too late." "Is it?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "Because standing here looking at you, seeing that you're carrying our baby, nothing feels finished." "Baby," Eden repeated, and something shifted in her expression. She almost smiled, but it was sad, complicated. "Seth, there's something else you need to know." His heart hammered against his ribs. "What?" "It's not just one baby. It's twins." The world tilted. Seth gripped the doorframe to steady himself, his knuckles white. "Twins. Twin boys. Actually, I found out last week." Eden's voice softened despite herself. "They're healthy, growing perfectly. Due in early May." Seth felt his legs weaken. Twin sons, 2 children he'd never known existed, never planned for, never thought he wanted. But looking at Eden now, seeing the protective curve of her hands around her belly, something fierce and primal awakened in his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Eden's expression sharpened again. "Tell you, Seth, I called you 17 times in September. 17. You sent every single call to voicemail." I finally stopped trying. The accusation hit home because it was true. He'd been hurt, angry, convinced that hearing her voice would only make the pain worse. So, he'd hidden behind his pride and let her calls go unanswered. "I didn't know you were trying to tell me something important," he said weakly. "Everything was important, Eden's voice rose, 3 months of suppressed hurt pouring out. I was scared, Seth. I was alone and scared and pregnant with your children, and you couldn't even be bothered to pick up the phone. The pain in her voice cut through him like glass. He thought about those weeks in September, how he'd sat in his office listening to her voicemails but never calling back, too stubborn and wounded to bridge the gap between them. I thought you wanted space, he said. I thought I wanted my husband. The words exploded from her, raw and desperate. I wanted the man I fell in love with, not the stranger you'd become. I wanted you to fight for us, instead of just letting me go. They stared at each other in the doorway, 3 months of silence and misunderstanding crackling between them like electricity. Eden's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Seth realized his own vision was blurring. I'm fighting now, he said quietly. I know it's too late. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm here. I'm fighting. Eden wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Why now? Why tonight? Seth looked down at his soaked clothes, at the absurdity of his impulsive decision to drive through a storm to her door. Because I woke up this morning in that perfect apartment you always hated, and I realized I'd rather live in chaos with you than in perfection without you. Something flickered across Eden's face. Surprise, hope, weariness, all tangled together. Seth, I know you have every right to hate me, he continued, stepping closer. I know I was controlling and cold and I pushed you away when I should have held you closer. But seeing you now, knowing about our sons, his voice broke slightly on the word sons, I can't walk away again. I won't. Eden was quiet for a long moment, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly. They move a lot at night, she said softly, seemingly out of nowhere. The doctor says they're going to be active babies. They remind me of you, actually, never quite still. The image hit Seth unexpectedly. Eden, lying in bed, alone, feeling their children move, thinking of him. Can I? He gestured toward her belly, then stopped, uncertain. Feel them. Eden searched his face, seeing something there she hadn't expected. Slowly, she nodded. They're awake now, actually. They always get active when I'm emotional. With trembling hands, Seth reached out and gently placed his palms on either side of her rounded stomach. Through the soft fabric of her sweater, he could feel the firm swell of her belly, warm and alive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if responding to their father's touch, both babies moved, a rolling, shifting sensation that took Seth's breath away. Oh God, he whispered, his eyes wide. They're real. They're actually real. Very real, Eden said, watching his face transform with wonder, and very active. Seth looked up at her, his eyes bright with emotion. Eden, I know I have no right to ask this, but can I be part of this? Can I be their father? The vulnerability in his voice, the man she glimpsed beneath his usual armor, made Eden's heart clench. This was the Seth she'd fallen in love with, the one who existed beneath all the walls and controls. But 3 months of hurt couldn't be erased by one conversation in a doorway. I need to think, she said finally. This is a lot, Seth, you showing up here, the twins, everything. Of course, he said quickly, stepping back but not removing his hands entirely. I understand. I hope you'll give me a chance to prove I can be different, better. As if summoned by their conversation, both babies moved again, a synchronized dance that made Eden gasp softly. Seth felt it too, his sons responding to the sound of their parents' voices. They like you, Eden said, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she almost smiled. I love them already, Seth said, and the honesty in his voice made Eden's heart skip. And I never stopped loving you. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and 3 months of pain. Seth's hands were still resting on Eden's belly, feeling the subtle movements of their sons, when she suddenly pulled back. You should come inside, she said quietly, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself, before the neighbors start wondering why my ex-husband is standing on my porch in a thunderstorm. Seth followed her into the small but warm brownstone, immediately struck by how different it felt from their old life together, where their penthouse had been all clean lines and expensive art. Eden's new home was lived in, cozy, books were stacked on every surface, a half-finished mug of tea sat on the coffee table, and soft jazz played from a vintage radio in the corner. It's not much, Eden said, noticing his survey of the space, but it's mine. The emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on him. This was the life she'd built without him, the sanctuary she'd created when their marriage fell apart. It's perfect, Seth said, and meant it. It's so you. Eden moved carefully to the kitchen, her hand trailing along furniture for support. Seth noticed the slight waddle in her walk, the way she paused to catch her breath. 5 months pregnant with twins, she had to be exhausted. Tea, she offered, already reaching for another mug. Let me. Seth stepped forward, gently taking the kettle from her hands. You should sit. I'm pregnant, not helpless, Eden said. But there was no real heat in it. She lowered herself onto the couch with visible relief. Seth busied himself with the tea, grateful for something to do with his hands, the domestic simplicity of the task, finding mugs, checking the water temperature. Felt surreal after months of rigid routine and takeout dinners, eaten alone at his granite countertop. Chamomile, Eden called from the living room. Doctor's orders. Caffeine makes the boys too active. The boys, their sons. Seth still couldn't quite process it. He carried the steaming mug to Eden, sitting carefully on the opposite end of the couch. Maintaining distance, he wasn't sure either of them wanted. When did you find out? He asked. About the pregnancy. Eden cuped the mug in both hands, staring into the pale liquid. October 15th. I'd been feeling sick for weeks, but I thought it was just stress from everything that happened between us. Seth's chest tightened. You went through that alone. I went through everything alone. The words were matter-of-fact, but they cut deep. The morning sickness, the first ultrasound, finding out there were 2 babies instead of 1. I sat in that doctor's office, and the technician was so excited, showing me the screen, talking about how special twins are, and all I could think was that you should have been there. The image was devastating. Eden in a sterile medical room, seeing their children for the first time, with no one to share the moment. Seth had been sitting in board meetings and conference calls while she navigated the most overwhelming experience of her life completely alone. I called you that day, Eden continued, her voice getting smaller. Right after the appointment, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to say. How do you leave a voicemail saying, "Hi, I know we're getting divorced, but surprise, we're having twins, Eden"? I hung up without leaving a message. Just like the other 16 times, she took a shaky sip of tea. Eventually, I stopped trying. Seth felt sick. While he'd been nursing his wounded pride, she'd been carrying the weight of their future alone. I'm so sorry. God, Eden, I'm so sorry. Are you? The question was sharp, direct. Or are you just sorry now that you know about the babies? Because if I hadn't been pregnant, would you still be sitting in your perfect penthouse congratulating yourself on a clean break? The accusation hit home because he wasn't entirely sure of the answer. Yes, he'd been miserable without her. Yes, he'd regretted letting her go. But would he have found the courage to come here tonight if he hadn't spent the day drowning in loneliness and scotch? I don't know, he admitted, the honesty's surprising them both. Maybe not tonight, maybe not for months, but Eden, I was miserable. Every single day without you was hell. Then why didn't you call me back? The question exploded from her with 3 months of pent-up frustration. Why didn't you fight for us when it mattered? Seth sat down his untouched tea, running his hands through his hair. Because I was scared. Because every time we fought, every time you looked at me like I was disappointing you, it felt like my father all over again. Eden's expression softened slightly. Seth rarely talked about his father, the cold businessman who'd raised him with criticism and impossible standards. I know that's not an excuse, Seth continued. I know I turned into exactly what I was trying to avoid. But when you said I measured everything, controlled everything, you were right. Control was how I survived growing up. It was how I built my business, how I protected myself. But I couldn't figure out how to love you without trying to control you. 2. I never wanted you to control me, Seth. I wanted you to trust me, to trust us. I know that now. He looked at her directly, his gray eyes intense. The night you left, after you walked out that door, I sat in our bedroom for hours. Your side of the closet was empty. Your books were gone from the nightstand. And I realized I'd been so busy trying to prevent you from leaving that I'd given you every reason to go. Eden was quiet, processing his words. Outside, the storm was intensifying, rain lashing against the windows with renewed force. I kept your ring, Seth said suddenly. I couldn't bring myself to return it. It's been sitting in my safe for 3 months. Seth, I know it doesn't change anything. I know I can't undo the last 3 months or the months before that when I was too proud and too scared to be the husband you deserved. But I want to try. If you'll let me, I want to be here for you, for them. As if responding to the emotional intensity in the room, both babies began moving again. Eden's hand went to her belly, and Seth watched as the fabric of her sweater shifted with their movements. They're getting stronger, she said softly. Sometimes I can actually see their kicks from the outside now. Can I? Seth gestured toward her belly again. This time, Eden didn't hesitate. She guided his hands to where the movement was strongest, and Seth felt his breath catch as a tiny foot, or maybe an elbow, pressed against his palm. "That's baby A," Eden said, a small smile breaking through her guardedness. "He's the troublemaker. Always moving, always active. The doctor says he's probably going to be bigger than his brother, and baby B. Quieter, but when he moves, it's purposeful, more thoughtful." I guess she moved Seth's other hand to the right side of her belly. "The ultrasound tech says his heartbeat is steadier, more measured." Seth felt the second baby move, a slower rolling motion that was somehow more deliberate than his brother's kicks. "They're already so different, like their parents," Eden said, then seemed to realize what she'd implied. A flush crept up her neck. They sat like that for several minutes, Seth's hands on Eden's belly, both of them marveling at the life they'd created together. Despite everything that had gone wrong between them, despite the divorce papers and the months of silence, their children were thriving. "Eden," Seth said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "I know I don't deserve it, but will you let me take care of you, both of you, all three of you? I don't want you going through the rest of this pregnancy alone." Eden studied his face, searching for something. "What exactly are you asking for, Seth?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't have a plan, or a contract, or a perfectly organized strategy. I just know that I love you, and I already love our sons, and I want to be better than I was before. I want to be the man you fell in love with." "That man never really went anywhere," Eden said quietly. "He just got buried under a lot of fear and control." "But Seth, I can't just forget the last year. I can't pretend that everything is fine just because you showed up here with the right words. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to let me earn your trust back, day by day, choice by choice." Eden was quiet for a long moment, her hands covering his on her belly. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm scared too, Seth. What if we try again, and it doesn't work? What if we just end up hurting each other more? I can't go through another separation, especially not with two babies depending on me. Then, we'll take it slow. No pressure. No expectations beyond what's best for you and the boys. Let me prove that I can be different." The grandfather clock in Eden's hallway chimed midnight, and she looked up with surprise. "It's Christmas Day. Merry Christmas," Seth said softly. For the first time since he'd arrived, Eden smiled, a real genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "Merry Christmas, Seth." Outside, the storm was beginning to calm, and inside, something fragile and hopeful was taking root between them. 3 weeks later, Seth woke to the unfamiliar sound of January rain against different windows. For a moment, disorientation clouded his mind. This wasn't his penthouse, wasn't his king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. He was on Eden's couch, covered by a handmade quilt that smelled faintly of lavender and her perfume. The events of the previous night came flooding back. The storm, Eden's pregnancy, their tentative truce. He sat up slowly, his back protesting after a night on the small sofa, and listened for sounds of movement upstairs. Nothing. Seth checked his phone. 8:47 a.m. In their old life together, Eden had always been an early riser, up by 7, even on weekends. But pregnancy changed everything he was learning. He moved quietly to the kitchen, taking in more details about Eden's new life. The refrigerator was covered with ultrasound photos, dozens of them, showing the progression of their son's growth. His chest tightened as he studied the images, realizing how many milestones he'd already missed. The refrigerator itself told another story. Instead of the designer organic everything that had stocked their old kitchen, Eden's shelves held practical necessities: pregnancy vitamins, ginger tea, crackers for morning sickness, and surprisingly little actual food. Seth frowned, opening cupboards to find similar sparseness. How was she feeding herself properly? Growing to babies required substantial nutrition, and from what he could see, Eden was living on the basics. "You're up early." Seth turned to find Eden in the doorway, wearing an oversized robe that barely closed over her belly. Her hair was mused from sleep, and she moved with the careful deliberation of someone still learning to navigate a changed body. "I'm used to early mornings," he said, then gestured to the open refrigerator. "Eden, are you eating enough? There's barely any food here." A defensive expression crossed her face. "I eat plenty. Morning sickness makes it hard to keep much down, especially in the first trimester. But you're in your second trimester now. You need protein, calcium, iron." "Seth, Eden's voice carried a warning edge. Don't start. He held up his hands in surrender, recognizing the tone. This was exactly the kind of overstepping that had driven wedges between them before. But watching her struggle to reach the tea kettle, seeing how carefully she moved, every protective instinct in his body was screaming. I'm sorry, he said. I just want to take care of you. Eden's expression softened slightly. I know, but I've been taking care of myself just fine for 3 months. My doctor says the boys are growing perfectly. Dr. Morrison, Seth asked, remembering their old family physician. No, I changed doctors. Dr. Chen specializes in high-risk pregnancies. When pregnancies automatically qualify as high risk, the words hit Seth like a physical blow. High risk? His wife, ex-wife, was carrying their children through a high-risk pregnancy, and he hadn't even known she existed until last night. What does high-risk mean exactly? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. Eden settled into a kitchen chair, her movements careful. Higher chance of complications, premature labor, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia. Dr. Chen monitors me twice a week now. Twice a week. Seth's composure cracked. Eden, why didn't you? He stopped himself, remembering the 17 unanswered calls she had tried to tell him. The appointments are expensive, Eden continued matter-of-factly, but my insurance covers most of it, and I've been saving money by adjusting my lifestyle. Seth looked around the sparse kitchen with new understanding. She wasn't being careless with nutrition. She was stretching every dollar to afford proper medical care. How much do the appointments cost? He asked quietly. Seth, no. How much, Eden? She studied his face for a long moment. 300 each, but like I said, insurance covers 60%. I know how insurance works. Seth was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling my accountant. You shouldn't be worrying about medical bills. Put the phone down. Eden's voice was firm. I don't want your money. It's not my money. It's our children's health. The words came out sharper than he intended, and he saw Eden flinch. They stared at each other across the small kitchen. 3 months of hurt and pride crackling between them. Seth forced himself to take a breath, to remember what he'd promised the night before about earning her trust. I'm sorry, he said, setting his phone on the counter. That's not how I meant to say it, but it's what you meant. No. Seth moved closer, careful not to crowd her. What I meant is that I want to be part of this. I want to contribute to Dr. Vizis and baby, clothes and cribs and college funds and everything else that comes with raising children. Not because you can't handle it yourself, but because they're my responsibility. To Eden's hand moved protectively to her belly. I don't want our sons to grow up thinking money solves everything. The comment hit home. Another echo of their old fights. Seth had always thrown money at problems. The best restaurants when they fought. Expensive gifts when he worked too late. First-class vacations when their marriage needed attention. You're right, he said. Money doesn't solve everything, but it can solve some things. That can make sure you're eating properly and not stressed about bills while you're growing our children. Before Eden could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went pale. Dr. Chen, but it's Christmas. Yes, I can talk. Seth watched as Eden's expression grew increasingly concerned. She was nodding, asking short questions. Her free hand pressed against her belly. Okay. Yes, I understand. Thank you for calling. She hung up and sat silent for a moment, processing whatever she'd been told. Eden, what's wrong? My blood pressure was elevated at my last appointment, she said slowly. Dr. Chen just got the results from additional tests she ordered. She wants to see me this afternoon instead of waiting until next week. What does that mean? It could be nothing. Or it could be the beginning of Eden's voice was steady, but Seth could see the fear in her eyes. She wants to monitor me more closely. Seth felt the world tilt. What happens if it is preeclampsia? Bed rest, possible early delivery if it gets severe. With twins, Eden's voice trailed off. With twins, what? The risks are higher for the babies, and for me. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Christmas morning traffic. Seth stared at Eden, processing the magnitude of what she just told him. Not only was she carrying their children through a high-risk pregnancy, but there might be serious complications developing. I'm going with you, he said. Seth, no arguments. I'm going with you to the appointment. His voice carried a finality that baked no discussion. I should have been there for the other appointments. I'm not missing any more. Eden studied his face, seeing something there that made her nod slowly. Okay. and I'm staying here until then. On the couch is fine. I don't want you alone if your blood pressure is acting up. The doctor didn't say, Eden. Seth knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. I know you're strong. I know you've been handling everything alone and doing an amazing job, but you don't have to anymore. Let me help, please. For a moment, Eden's carefully maintained composure cracked. The fear she'd been holding back since the doctor's call flickered across her features. Fear for their babies, fear of complications, fear of facing another medical crisis alone. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. Seth squeezed her hands gently. I'm scared, too, but we'll figure this out together. As if responding to their parents' emotional state, both babies began moving restlessly. Eden winced as a particularly strong kick hit her ribs. They know when I'm stressed, she said. Dr. Chen says stress makes everything worse. Seth stood and moved to the kitchen. Decisiveness, replacing fear. Then we eliminate stress. Starting now, what do you normally eat for breakfast, Seth? You don't need to. Toast eggs. What sounds good to you right now? Eden watched as he opened cupboards and assessed their meager contents with the same focus he'd once brought to corporate acquisitions. But instead of criticism, she saw genuine care in his movements. French toast, she said quietly. I've been craving it for weeks, but I can't find the energy to make it. French toast it is. Seth was already reaching for eggs and milk. Go sit down. Put your feet up. I should help, Eden. He looked at her with gentle firmness. Let me take care of you. Just for today. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and made her way to the living room. As Seth began cooking, something he'd rarely done in their old life together, Eden settled onto the couch and felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. For the first time in months, she wasn't carrying everything alone. Dr. Chen's office was nothing like the sterile medical facilities Seth was accustomed to. The walls were painted in warm earth tones, soft classical music played overhead, and family photos covered every available surface. Testament to the countless babies Dr. Chen had helped bring safely into the world. Seth sat in the waiting room, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. As Eden completed her preliminary tests, he'd insisted on driving her to the appointment, and she hadn't argued. A small victory that felt enormous given their history. Mr. Carrington. Seth looked up to find a petite woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Dr. Chen's handshake was firm, her smile warm but professional. I'm glad you could make it today, she said. Eden has told me a lot about you. Seth wondered what exactly Eden had shared, but before he could ask, Dr. Chen was leading him down a hallway lined with ultrasound images and thank you cards from grateful families. They found Eden sitting on an examination table, a blood pressure cuff around her arm, and a concerned expression on her face. A nurse was recording numbers on a chart, her own expression carefully neutral. What's the reading? Dr. Chan asked. 148/96. The nurse replied. That's up from 142/94 on Friday. Seth didn't need medical training to know those numbers weren't good. He saw Eden's face go pale as Dr. Chen frowned at the chart. Eden, I want to run a few more tests today, Dr. Chen said, her voice gentle but serious. At 24 weeks with twins, the blood pressure elevation combined with the protein levels we found in your urine, samples suggest we need to monitor you very closely. Protein in her urine. Seth found his voice. What does that mean? Dr. Chen looked between Seth and Eden. It's one of the early markers for preeclampsia. Combined with elevated blood pressure, it indicates Eden's body is struggling with the demands of carrying twins. Eden's hand moved protectively to her belly. Are the babies okay right now? Yes. Their heartbeats are strong, and they're measuring appropriately for gestational age. But preeclampsia can progress quickly, especially with multiples. Dr. Chen pulled up a chair, positioning herself at eye level with both parents. I want to be completely honest with you both about what we're looking at. Seth reached for Eden's hand without thinking, and to his relief, she didn't pull away. If this is early preeclampsia, we'll need to manage it carefully for the rest of your pregnancy, Dr. Chen continued. That means modified bed rest, frequent monitoring, medication if necessary, and quite possibly early delivery. How early? Eden's voice was barely above a whisper. Ideally, we want to get you to at least 32 weeks. That would be early February. Every week we can keep the babies in utero after that as a bonus. But 32 weeks gives them excellent survival odds with minimal complications. Seth felt the blood drain from his face. You're talking about the babies being born 8 weeks early. Twin pregnancies rarely go to full term. Dr. Chen said gently. 36 to 37 weeks is considered normal for twins, but if Eden's condition deteriorates, we may need to deliver earlier to save both her life and the baby's. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Eden's life. Seth hadn't even considered that pregnancy could be dangerous for her. Not really. In his mind, pregnancy was uncomfortable but ultimately safe, a natural process that billions of women navigated without major incident. What about Eden? He asked. What are the risks for her? Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. Untreated preeclampsia can lead to seizures, stroke, organ failure, or death. But that's why we catch it early, why we monitor closely. Most women with preeclampsia go on to have healthy babies and full recoveries. Most women, Seth repeated. What about women carrying twins? The risks are higher, Dr. Chen admitted, but Eden is young, healthy, and now she has an excellent support system. She glanced meaningfully at their joined hands. A nurse knocked softly before entering. Dr. Chen, the lab results are back. Dr. Chen reviewed the papers quickly, her frown deepening. Eden, your kidney function is showing some stress. Nothing dangerous yet, but it confirms my suspicions about Eden's grip on Seth's hand tightened. What happens now? Now we take this one day at a time. I'm prescribing modified bed rest. You can be up for meals and showers, but otherwise I want you horizontal with your feet elevated. No work, no stress, no heavy lifting. And I want to see you twice a week instead of once. I can't take that much time off work. Eden protested. I'm a partner at my firm. I have cases. Eden. Dr. Chen's voice was firm. I need you to understand something. Preeclampsia doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about your career or your cases or your independence. If we don't manage this aggressively, you could lose these babies, or worse. The blunt words hit like a slap. Eden fell silent, the reality of her situation finally sinking in completely. I'll handle the work situation, Seth said quietly. Whatever you need, medical leave, temporary replacement, someone to cover your cases. I'll make it happen, Seth. I don't want. This isn't about what you want, he said, his voice gentle but implacable. This is about keeping you and our sons alive. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. Mr. Carrington is right. This is not the time for pride or independence. This is the time to let people take care of you. After scheduling Eden's next appointment and collecting a list of warning signs to watch for, they made their way to Seth's car in silence. Eden moved slowly, her hand pressed to her lower back. And Seth noticed she was slightly out of breath, just from walking to the parking lot. We're going to my place, Seth said as he started the engine. Seth, no. I want to go home. Your place has stairs. My penthouse has an elevator, a dormant, and 24-hour concierge service. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. Seth turned to look at her directly. Eden, you just heard the doctor say you could have seizures or organ failure. You heard her say this could kill you. I am not taking any chances. The fear in his voice was raw, unguarded. Eden saw something in his face she'd rarely seen before. Genuine terror at the thought of losing her. My things are at my apartment, she said weakly. We'll get them, all of them, whatever you need. Seth's hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. Eden, I can't lose you. I can't lose any of you. Please. The desperation in his voice broke through her remaining resistance. She nodded slowly. Okay, but I want my own space. I'm not sharing your bedroom. Guest suite. It has its own bathroom and sitting area. You'll have complete privacy. Seth was already mentally rearranging his life around her needs. I'll hire a nurse if you want someone to help. No nurses. Just be there if I need you. Always, Seth said immediately. I'll always be there. As they drove through the city, toward Seth's penthouse. Eden stared out the window at the post-Christmas landscape. Her old life, her independence, her career, her carefully constructed world without Seth was crumbling around her. But as she felt the babies move restlessly in response to her stress, she realized that protecting them was worth any sacrifice, even if it meant trusting Seth Carrington again. There's something else, Eden said quietly as they pulled into the underground garage of Seth's building. What? My firm? My partnership? She took a shaky breath. If I take extended medical leave now, especially this close to the end of the fiscal year, I'll lose my partnership track. 3 years of work gone. Seth turned off the engine but didn't move to get out of the car. How much does your partnership mean to you? Everything. It was my proof that I could succeed on my own, that I didn't need anyone else's money or connections or help. And now, Eden placed both hands on her belly, feeling the strong movements of their sons. Now, I don't know what matters anymore. Seth reached over and covered her hands with his. What matters is getting these boys here safely. Everything else we can figure out later. What if there is no later, Seth? What if this preeclampsia gets worse? What if, hey? Seth turned her face toward his gently. Don't go there. We're going to get through this. All of us. Eden searched his eyes, looking for the confidence she'd lost. What she found there was something deeper than confidence. It was absolute determination. Seth Carrington, who had built an empire through sheer force of will, had just turned that same intensity toward keeping his family alive. For the first time since leaving Dr. Chen's office, Eden felt like she could breathe. 2 weeks into February, the guest suite in Seth's penthouse was larger than Eden's entire Brooklyn apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, while the sitting area could have housed a small family. Everything was perfectly appointed, from the Egyptian cotton linens to the fresh orchids on the nightstand. It was beautiful, expensive, and felt absolutely nothing like home. Eden sat on the edge of the king-size bed, overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. At 26 weeks pregnant with twins just hours ago, she'd been in her cozy brownstone, independent and in control. Now she was back in Seth's world, a world she deliberately left behind. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Eden, can I come in? It's your apartment, she called back, then immediately regretted the defensive tone. Seth entered, carrying a tray laden with what looked like half the contents of an upscale delicatessen. I wasn't sure what you'd want to eat, so I had Marcus pick up options. Marcus, Eden remembered Seth's personal assistant, efficient, discreet, and probably capable of procuring anything from caviar to moon rocks within an hour's notice. The life of casual luxury she'd tried so hard to forget. You didn't have to do all this, Eden said, gesturing at the spread of gourmet sandwiches, fresh fruit, and what appeared to be homemade soup. Dr. Chen said, you need protein and iron, and you're eating for 3 now. Seth set the tray on the coffee table, his movements careful, deliberate. I also called Dr. Morrison, our old doctor. He's consulting with Dr. Chen on your case. Seth, Eden's voice carried a warning. I told you I'm happy with Dr. Chen. I'm not changing doctors. I'm just making sure she has every resource available. Seth sat across from her, maintaining careful distance. Dr. Morrison has connections at Mount C's NICU. If the babies come early, he didn't finish the sentence, but Eden understood. Seth was preparing for every possible scenario, building safety nets she hadn't even considered. It was vintage Seth, the man who had backup plans for his backup plans. You can't control this, you know, Eden said quietly. Preeclampsia doesn't respond to money or connections or perfectly organized strategies. I know that. Seth's jaw was tight, but I can control everything around it. The best doctors, the best facilities, the best care for you and the boys. I can control that much. Eden reached for a sandwich, mainly to have something to do with her hands. The bread was artisanal, the turkey premium, the vegetables impossibly fresh. Even the food in Seth's world was perfect. I got the results from your firm, Seth said carefully. About your partnership. Eden's hand froze halfway to her mouth. You called my firm. Your assistant called me. Apparently, you're listed as my emergency contact. Seth's voice was gentle. The managing partners want to discuss your extended leave. There's a meeting scheduled for next week. The sandwich turned to dust in Eden's mouth. 3 years of 18-hour days, missed dinners, sacrificed weekends, all building toward the partnership she'd been promised. The partnership that would prove she belonged in the elite legal world on her own merits, not as someone's wife. What did they say exactly? That extended medical leave during review period could impact partnership consideration. But Eden, there are laws. Laws don't matter when there are 10 other candidates who don't need medical accommodations. Eden sat down the sandwich, her appetite gone. I knew this would happen. Seth moved to sit beside her on the bed, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent that used to linger on her pillow when they were happy. What if I told you the partnership doesn't matter anymore? Easy for you to say. You've never had to prove yourself to anyone, haven't I? Seth's voice was quiet. Do you think building my company was easy? Do you think the aviation industry welcomed a 25-year-old with open arms? I've been proving myself my entire life, Eden. The difference is now I want to prove myself to the people who actually matter. Your business matters. My business is just business. You and our sons, that's everything. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Eden studied Seth's face, looking for the calculation she used to see there, the careful weighing of costs and benefits. Instead, she saw something raw, more desperate. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe this is a chance to build something different together. Seth reached out tentatively, covering her hand with his. What if instead of you trying to fit into my world or me trying to fit into yours, we created something new? Before Eden could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her right side. She gasped, doubling over as her hand flew to her ribs. Eden, what's wrong? The pain intensified, accompanied by a strange tightness across her belly. Eden tried to breathe through it, but each breath felt shallow, insufficient. Something's wrong, she managed. Call Dr. Chen. Seth was already reaching for his phone, but Eden grabbed his wrist. Not the phone. Take me to the hospital now. The next few minutes blurred together, Seth helping her to the elevator, the frantic drive through Manhattan traffic, the wheelchair ride through the emergency department of Mount C. Eden's pain had intensified and her vision was starting to blur at the edges. I can't see properly, she told the triage nurse. Everything's getting fuzzy. Blood pressure is 168/102. Someone called out, get Dr. Chen down here now. Another voice commanded. And prep O3, operating room. Eden's heart hammered against her ribs. Are the babies okay? I need to know the babies are okay. A portable ultrasound machine appeared and Eden felt the familiar cold gel on her belly. The technician moved the wand with practiced efficiency and suddenly the room filled with the rapid sound of 2 heartbeats. Both babies have strong heartbeats, the technician said. But baby A is showing some signs of distress. Dr. Chan arrived like a small whirlwind, immediately taking charge of the situation. Eden, your blood pressure is dangerously high. We need to get it under control immediately, or we're looking at potential seizure activity. What about the babies right now? They're okay. But if we can't stabilize you, Dr. Chun didn't finish the sentence. Seth appeared at Eden's side, his face pale, but determined. What do you need? Whatever it takes. I need Eden calm and horizontal. We're going to start medication to bring down her blood pressure. But if it doesn't work quickly, we may need to consider emergency delivery. At 24 weeks, Eden's voice was barely a whisper. They're too small. They're 25 weeks, actually. And babies born at 25 weeks have a fighting chance. Especially with the NICU here. Dr. Chen's voice was kind, but firm. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Medicine first. The next hour passed in a haze of monitors and medications. Hushed conversations between medical staff and Seth's constant presence at Eden's bedside. Gradually, the crushing pain in her side began to ease and her vision started to clear. Blood pressure is coming down, a nurse reported. 158/95. Better, but not good enough, Dr. Chun said. We're going to admit you for observation. At least 48 hours, possibly longer. I can't stay in the hospital for days, Eden. Seth's voice was quiet but absolute. You're staying as long as Dr. Chen says you need to stay. Eden wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of her. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. This wasn't just elevated blood pressure or routine pregnancy complications. This was serious, life-threatening, and completely beyond her control. I'm scared, she whispered. Seth leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. I know I'm scared, too, but we're going to get through this. What if we don't? What if something happens to the babies? Then we'll face that together, too. Seth's voice was steady, certain. But Eden, listened to me. You are the strongest person I know. You've already carried our sons through 5 months of pregnancy on your own. You've built a career, survived our divorce, and created a whole new life for yourself. If anyone can get through this, it's you. The words weren't just comfort, they were truth. Eden had survived every challenge life had thrown at her, including losing the man she loved. Now that same man was back, and somehow that made her feel stronger, not weaker. Will you stay? She asked. At the hospital, I mean. Try to make me leave, Seth said. And for the first time in days, Eden smiled. As the medical team prepared to move her to a private room, Eden felt the babies move restlessly in response to all the commotion. But their heartbeats remained strong on the monitor. 2 steady rhythms that seemed to say they weren't giving up without a fight. Neither was she. The hospital room at 3 o'clock in the morning was a universe of beeping monitors and harsh fluorescent light. Eden lay propped up in bed, unable to find a comfortable position with the constant fetal monitors strapped around her belly and the blood pressure cuff that inflated every 15 minutes. Seth had claimed the uncomfortable reclining chair beside her bed, his usually perfect appearance disheveled after 2 days of living in hospital waiting rooms and vending machine coffee. His shirt was wrinkled, His hair and Eden could see the shadow of stubble along his jawline. "You should go home," she whispered, not wanting to wake the nursing staff. "Get some real sleep." "I'm fine here," Seth replied, though his voice was with exhaustion. "Seth, you haven't left this room except to shower. That's not sustainable." He turned to look at her, and in the dim light, Eden saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. A deep, primal fear that had nothing to do with business deals or financial markets. "I can't leave," he said simply. "What if something happens when I'm not here? The nurses will call you. I have your number." "That's not the same thing." Seth shifted in his chair, trying to find a position that didn't make his back ache. "Eden, 3 days ago, I thought I'd lost you forever. I thought our marriage was over, that I'd never see you again. Then I found out about the babies, and now," he gestured helplessly at the medical equipment surrounding her, "now I might lose all of you." The raw honesty in his voice made Eden's chest tighten. This wasn't the controlled, measured Seth she'd married. This was a man stripped down to his most basic emotions. "You're not going to lose us," she said. "You don't know that," Dr. Chen said. Dr. Chen said, "My blood pressure is stabilizing. The medication is working." Eden reached out to take his hand. "The babies are strong. Look at these monitors. Their heartbeats haven't wavered once." As if summoned by her words, both babies began their nightly dance, rolling and kicking with the restless energy that had become familiar. Eden winced as a particularly strong kick hit her ribs. "Baby A?" Seth asked. "Definitely. He's been especially active since we got here. I think he doesn't like the hospital food any more than I do." Seth smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since their emergency arrival. "Speaking of which, I brought you something." He reached into a bag beside his chair and pulled out a thermos. "Chicken soup from Sarah's. Real chicken soup, not hospital cafeteria mystery liquid." Eden's eyes filled with unexpected tears. Sarah's had been their place, the small, unassuming restaurant where Seth had proposed, where they'd celebrated their first anniversary, where they'd gone for comfort food during the early happy days of their marriage. "You remembered," she whispered. "I remember everything about us, Eden. Every conversation, every moment, every mistake I made." Seth opened the thermos, and the rich aroma of homemade soup filled the sterile room. "I remember that you always ordered the chicken soup when you were sick or stressed. I remember that you liked extra crackers, and that you always saved the carrots for last." He was right about all of it. The fact that he'd noticed such small details had held on to them through their separation and divorce made something crack open in Eden's chest. "Why did we let it all fall apart?" she asked as Seth carefully arranged the soup and crackers on her bedside table. Seth was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Because I was more afraid of losing control than I was of losing you. And by the time I realized how wrong that was, you were already gone." "I wasn't gone, Seth. I was right there begging you to let me in, to talk to me instead of managing me." "I know." Seth sat back down, his eyes fixed on his hands. "My father used to say that emotions were weaknesses, that successful men didn't let feelings interfere with logic. I spent so many years building walls that I forgot how to take them down, even for you." Eden spooned the warm soup slowly, savoring both the familiar taste and the conversation they should have had months ago. "What changed? Why are you telling me this now?" "Because almost losing you, almost losing our children, made me realize that all the success in the world means nothing if I'm facing it alone." Seth looked up at her, his gray eyes intense. "I'd rather fail at everything else and succeed at being your husband and their father." The words hung in the air between them, more intimate than any physical touch. Eden felt her heart racing, and immediately one of the monitors began beeping faster. Mrs. Carrington, a night nurse, appeared in the doorway. "Is everything all right?" "Your heart rate spiked." "I'm fine," Eden said quickly, then caught herself. "I mean, Ms. Morell, we're divorced." The nurse glanced at Seth, who was wearing a wedding ring Eden hadn't noticed before, then back at Eden's bare ring finger. "Of course, I'll just check your vitals." As the nurse bustled around, taking readings, Eden stared at Seth's left hand. "You're still wearing your ring." Seth glanced down, as if he'd forgotten. "I never took it off. But we're divorced. The papers said we couldn't be married anymore. They didn't say I had to stop loving you." Eden's breath caught. The monitor began beeping faster again, and the nurse frowned at the readout. "Ms. Muriel, I need you to try to stay calm. Your blood pressure is starting to climb again." "I'm trying," Eden said, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. 3 months of suppressed feelings were bubbling to the surface, and she didn't know how to process them while hooked up to machines that broadcast every emotional fluctuation. "Sir," the nurse said to Seth. Perhaps you could give the patient some space to rest. No, the word came out sharper than Eden intended. Please, I need him here. The nurse looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand, then nodded. I'll be back in 30 minutes to check on you. When they were alone again, Eden turned to Seth. Put your hand here. She guided his palm to her belly where baby B was doing slow, deliberate movements. Seth's eyes widened as he felt their son responding to his touch. He knows you're here, Eden whispered. They both do. Even when I was angry with you, even when I thought I hated you, I used to put my hands here and tell them about their father. How brilliant you are, how determined, how you never give up on anything important to you. Eden, I told them how you proposed to me in the middle of a thunderstorm because you couldn't wait another day, how you learned to make pancakes from scratch because I mentioned once that I missed my grandmother's recipe, how you used to read Forbes to me when I couldn't sleep because my job stressed me out. Seth's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I remember that you said my voice was better than any sleeping pill. It was true. Everything about you was better than I wanted to admit. Eden covered his hand with both of hers. I never stopped loving you either, Seth. I was just so tired of fighting for us alone. You're not alone anymore, aren't I? When this crisis is over, when the babies are born safely, what then? Do we just go back to our separate lives? Do you go back to your penthouse and I go back to Brooklyn? Seth was quiet for so long that Eden wondered if he'd fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I have a confession to make. What? I've been driving past your apartment for 3 months, not stalking, he added quickly, just checking, making sure your lights were on, that you seemed okay. I hired a security company to patrol your street discreetly, because that neighborhood isn't as safe as I wanted it to be. Eden stared at him. You what? I know it was wrong. I know I had no right, but I couldn't stop caring about your safety just because we signed papers. Seth, that's crazy. Controlling. I know, sweet, Eden finished, surprising them both, misguided and probably illegal, but sweet. Seth looked up at her, hope flickering in his eyes. Does that mean you might consider giving us another chance? A real chance this time. Before Eden could answer, both babies began moving simultaneously, a rolling, kicking symphony that made her gasp. On the monitor, their heartbeats quickened as if they were responding to the emotional intensity in the room. They want us to try again, Eden said softly, watching the patterns on the fetal monitor. Smart kids, Seth said. They clearly inherited your intelligence and your stubbornness. God help us all. For the first time in months, Eden laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled the sterile hospital room with something that felt like hope. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Ask me again, Eden said. What? When we get out of here, when our sons are born safely, when we've had time to figure out who we are now. Ask me again about giving us another chance. Seth brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. I'll ask you every day until you say yes. That might take a while. I have time, Seth said. I have all the time in the world. 2 weeks had passed since Eden's last hospital scare, and she'd made it to 27 weeks. A milestone Dr. Chen had celebrated with cautious optimism. She spent mornings in bed with her laptop, reviewing case files remotely while Seth worked from his home office. Afternoons were 4 doctor appointments, prenatal vitamins, and the endless monitoring that high-risk pregnancy demanded. Evenings belonged to them. Tentative conversations over dinner, gentle debates about baby names, and the careful reconstruction of intimacy. It was working somehow. Impossibly, it was working until the morning Eden woke up to find blood on her sheets. Seth, the panic in her voice carried through the penthouse, and within seconds, he was bursting through her bedroom door, still wearing his pajamas and the wire-rimmed glasses he used for reading. What's wrong? His eyes immediately went to the crimson stain on the white linens and his face went ashen. Oh God, Eden, we need to get to the hospital. Now it's not that much blood, Eden said, but her voice was shaking. Maybe it's normal. Maybe Dr. Chen said any bleeding at this stage was an emergency. Seth was already reaching for clothes, his movements sharp and efficient. I'm calling an ambulance. No ambulances. Too many questions. Too much attention. Eden struggled to sit up, her movements careful. Just drive me, please. The ride to Mount C was a blur of city traffic and suppressed panic. Seth's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and Eden found herself gripping the armrest as each contraction-like cramp rolled through her abdomen. They're too small, she whispered, as Seth helped her into a wheelchair at the emergency entrance. 7 weeks is still too small. They're fighters, Seth said, but she could hear the fear beneath his calm tone. They're going to be fine. Dr. Chen met them in triage, her expression serious as she reviewed Eden's symptoms. The bleeding has stopped, which is good news, but I want to do an ultrasound immediately and check your cervix. The next hour felt like a lifetime. Eden lay on the examination table while Dr. Chen and a team of specialists moved the ultrasound wand across her belly, their faces carefully neutral as they took measurements and exchanged quiet comments. Finally, Dr. Chen turned to them with a small smile. The babies look good, strong heartbeats, appropriate growth, no signs of distress. But Eden, your cervix is starting to shorten. You're beginning early labor. Early labor. Seth's voice was sharp. What does that mean? It means we need to stop it immediately. Dr. Chen was already motioning to the nurses. We're going to admit you again, start you on medications to halt the contractions, and give you steroid shots to help the baby's lungs develop faster, in case we can't stop the labor entirely. Can't stop it. Eden felt the world tilting. You have to stop it. They're not ready. We're going to do everything we can. But Eden, I need you to understand. We may only be able to buy you days or weeks, not months. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that these babies might arrive much sooner than we hope. As they wheeled Eden to a private room, Seth walked alongside the gurney, his hand never leaving hers. Once she was settled and hooked up to the now familiar array of monitors, he pulled his chair close to her bedside. What aren't you telling me? He asked quietly. What do you mean, Eden? I've known you for 5 years. When you're really scared, you get this look like you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't have a solution. You've had that look since we got here. Eden closed her eyes, debating how much to share, but they'd promised honesty this time. Complete transparency, even when the truth was terrifying. I did research, she said finally on my phone while we were waiting for Dr. Chen. Babies born at 27 weeks. The survival rate is good, but the complications. What complications? Cerebral palsy, developmental delays, learning disabilities, chronic lung problems. Eden's voice broke slightly. Seth, what if we fight so hard to keep them alive that we condemn them to lives of suffering? Seth was quiet for a long moment, processing her fears. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but certain. Then we love them anyway. Whatever challenges they face, whatever help they need, we figure it out together. You say that now, but what about when they're 5 and can't walk? What about when they're 10 and can't keep up with other kids? What about Eden? Seth moved to sit on the edge of her bed, taking both her hands in his. Look at me. She met his gray eyes, seeing something there that made her breath catch. 25 years ago, my younger brother was born 3 months premature. Jaime weighed 1 pound 11 oz. The doctor said he probably wouldn't survive. And if he did, he'd never be normal. Eden stared at him. In all their years together, Seth had never mentioned a brother. Where is he now? He's a pediatric surgeon in Boston, graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Medical, runs marathons for fun, and calls me every Sunday to make sure I'm eating vegetables. Seth's smile was soft, remembering the doctors were wrong about everything except one thing. Jaime was never normal. He was extraordinary. Why didn't you ever tell me about him? Seth looked down at their joined hands. Because my father was ashamed. Jaime's disabilities when he was young, the therapies, the special schools, my father saw them as weaknesses, failures. I learned early not to talk about Jaime because it upset my father. That's horrible. It was, but it also taught me that love isn't about having perfect children or a perfect life. It's about showing up for the people who matter, regardless of what challenges they bring. Eden felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm so scared, Seth. I'm scared, too, but we're not facing this alone anymore. A soft knock interrupted them, and Dr. Chen entered with a clipboard and a more optimistic expression. Good news, she said. I'm cautiously optimistic that we've bought you some time. You're now at 29 weeks, which is excellent progress. How much time? Seth asked. If we're lucky, 2 to 3 weeks. That would get you to 31 or 32 weeks, which dramatically improves outcomes for the babies. 2 to 3 weeks. Eden felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Every day the baby stayed inside her was crucial for their development. There's something else, Dr. Chen continued. I've been consulting with the NICU team, and they'd like to give you a tour. If these babies do arrive early, it helps parents to see the environment, meet the staff, understand what to expect. A tour of where our children might spend their first months of life, Eden said quietly. Hopefully not, but if they do, you'll know they're getting the best possible care. After Dr. Chen left, Seth and Eden sat in comfortable silence, listening to the steady rhythm of their son's heartbeats on the monitor. Finally, Seth spoke. I called my brother this morning while you were sleeping. You did. I told him about the babies, about your condition. He wants to fly down this weekend if you're comfortable meeting him. Eden considered this. Meeting Seth's family felt like a big step, an acknowledgement that they were building something real together. But the thought of connecting with someone who understood the challenges they might face was appealing. What's he like? Funny, stubborn, fiercely protective of the people he loves. He'll probably embarrass me with childhood stories and show you pictures of his own kids. He has children. Twin daughters, 5 years old, perfectly healthy, and absolutely convinced that Uncle Seth needs a wife because he's too serious all the time. Eden laughed, despite herself. Smart kids, they get it from their father. Jaime always could see things clearly, even when we were children. I'd like to meet him, Eden said. And his daughters, they'd love that. Fair warning, though. They'll probably ask you a million questions about the babies and want to feel them kick. As if responding to the conversation, both babies began their evening routine of rolling and stretching. Eden placed Seth's hand on her belly, and they both felt the strong, deliberate movements of their sons. They're getting stronger, Seth observed. Dr. Chen says they're measuring right on track for gestational age. Good size, strong heartbeats, fighters, just like their mother. Eden smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Genuine optimism about the future. Yes, there were still risks. Still complications that could arise, but sitting here with Seth, feeling their children move beneath their joined hands, she finally believed they might actually make it through this together. Seth, yay. When this is all over, when the boys are born safely, and we're all home together, ask me then. Seth looked at her questioningly about giving us another chance. Ask me then, and I'll have an answer for you. The smile that spread across Seth's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Is it going to be the answer I want to hear? Maybe, Eden said, her own smile matching his, but you'll have to wait and find out. Dr. Jaime Carrington arrived 2 weeks later, just as Eden reached 31 weeks of pregnancy. He was nothing like Eden had expected, where Seth was all sharp angles and controlled intensity. His younger brother radiated warmth and easy confidence. At 31, Jaime moved through the hospital corridors with the comfortable authority of someone who belonged there, stopping to chat with nurses and residents who clearly adored him. So, you're the woman who finally managed to humble my impossible brother, Jaime said as he settled into the visitor's chair beside Eden's hospital bed. His smile was infectious, and Eden could immediately see why children would trust him. I wouldn't say I humbled him, Eden replied, glancing at Seth, who was pretending to read medical journals while obviously listening to their conversation. More like temporarily tamed him. Hey, Seth protested without looking up. I'm sitting right here, Jaime laughed, a sound so genuine it made Eden smile despite her circumstances. He used to practice business presentations in the mirror when he was 15. I'd catch him negotiating with his reflection, Jaime, Seth warned, but there was no real heat in it, and he color-coded his college applications, not just by deadline, by statistical probability of acceptance. Okay, that's enough embarrassing stories for one day, Seth said, finally putting down his magazine. I've barely gotten started. Jaime grinned. Did Eden know that you learned Mandarin just to impress a girl in your sophomore economics class? Eden looked at Seth with raised eyebrows. You never told me you spoke Mandarin. Because I don't really. I learned enough to ask her to coffee. She said no anyway, and I promptly forgot everything except how to order dim sum. The easy banter between the brothers was exactly what Eden needed after days of medical consultations and worried silences. But she could also see the concern in Jaime's eyes as he discreetly assessed her condition with the practiced gaze of a physician. How are you really feeling? He asked, his tone shifting to professional. Like I'm carrying 2 future linebackers who think my rib cage is a punching bag, Eden said. But the bleeding stopped. Contractions are controlled, and we've made it to 29 weeks as of yesterday. That's excellent news. 29 weeks gives you much better odds. Jaime's expression was carefully optimistic. Seth told me you've been worried about potential complications. Eden nodded, appreciating his directness. I've done too much research probably, but the statistics are just numbers until they apply to specific children. Jaime leaned forward slightly. Can I share something with you? As both a doctor and someone who was born at 27 weeks, Please, the statistics don't account for love. They don't factor in parents who will fight for every therapy session, celebrate every small milestone, and refuse to accept limitations as permanent. My parents, he glanced at Seth. Well, one of my parents did that for me. Seth's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Eden realized Jaime was talking about their mother, not their father. What I'm saying is that if your sons do arrive early, if they do face challenges, they'll have something many prees don't. To parents who already love them unconditionally. To parents, Eden couldn't help but question Jaime. Seth and I are divorced. We're just figuring things out. Jaime looked between Seth and Eden, with the amused expression of someone watching two people pretend they weren't already deeply in love. Right. My mistake. His tone was pure innocence. I'm sure the fact that Seth hasn't left your bedside in 3 weeks, that he's memorized your medication schedule, and that he talks about our sons every third sentence is purely coincidental. Eden felt her cheeks warm. We're taking things slowly. Of course you are. Jaime's grin was knowing, just like Seth took things slowly when he bought an engagement ring after dating you for 6 months. But waited another year to propose because he wanted everything to be perfect. You bought the ring after 6 months. Eden stared at Seth, who was suddenly very interested in his hands. Jaime, I'm going to kill you, Seth muttered. He carried it everywhere for a year. Jaime continued cheerfully. Board meetings, business trips, family dinners. Mom caught him practicing the proposal speech in the garden during Christmas dinner. Your mother knew before I did. The whole family knew. Seth's not exactly subtle when he's in love. Jaime's expression grew more serious, which is why this separation has been so hard on him. I've never seen my brother more miserable than he's been these past few months. Eden looked at Seth, seeing something vulnerable in his expression that made her heart ache. You talked to your family about us. I had to talk to someone, Seth said quietly, and Jaime's the only person who ever calls me on my mistakes. Speaking of which, Jaime said, standing up, I should check on my girls. They're terrorizing the pediatric ward while I'm up here. You brought 5-year-olds to a hospital, Seth asked. They're doctors' kids. They're more comfortable in hospitals than most adults. Plus, they insisted on meeting their future cousins. Jaime headed toward the door, then paused. Eden, Seth told me you're concerned about being a good mother to prees. Can I give you some advice? Of course. Stop thinking of them as prees. Start thinking of them as your sons who happen to be arriving early. The moment you meet them, all the medical terminology disappears. They're just your babies, and you'll know exactly what they need. After Jaime left, the room fell into comfortable silence. Eden found herself processing everything she'd learned about Seth. The ring he'd carried for a year, the way he'd talked to his family about their separation, the depth of his feelings that he'd never fully expressed to her. A year, she finally asked. Seth looked up from where he'd been studying the fetal monitor readouts. What, you carried the engagement ring for a year before proposing? Jaime exaggerates. How long, really? Seth was quiet for a moment. 11 months and 2 weeks. Why so long? Because I wanted everything to be perfect. The right moment, the right place, the right words. Seth moved to sit on the edge of her bed. I was terrified you'd say no. I would have said yes after 6 months. I know that now, but back then, I couldn't imagine why someone like you would want to spend the rest of your life with someone like me. Eden reached for his hand. Someone like you, Seth. You're brilliant, successful, handsome, controlling, emotionally unavailable, obsessed with work. Those two, Eden admitted with a small smile, but also loyal, protective, and capable of loving someone so deeply that you carry a ring for almost a year just to make sure the proposal is perfect. Before Seth could respond, Eden's monitor began beeping rapidly. She felt a sharp cramping pain low in her abdomen, followed by a warm rush of fluid. Seth, she said, her voice tight with pain, I think my water just broke. Seth was on his feet instantly, hitting the call button for the nurses. Are you sure? Another contraction hit, stronger than the cramping she'd been experiencing. Eden gripped the bed rail as the pain peaked. I'm sure. Within minutes, the room filled with medical staff. Dr. Chen appeared, her expression serious, as she quickly examined Eden. Your membranes have ruptured, she confirmed. We're at 31 weeks and 3 days, which means we're having these babies today. Today, Eden's voice was small. They're not ready. They're as ready as they're going to be. 31 weeks gives us very good survival odds and manageable complication risks. Dr. Chen was already directing her team. We're going to prep you for C-section. The babies will go directly to the NICU, but Eden, they have an excellent chance. As the medical team began preparing for emergency surgery, Seth leaned down and pressed his forehead against Eden's. I love you, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I love you and I love our sons, and we're all going to be okay. Promise me, Eden said as another contraction built. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll make sure they know they're loved. Eden, nothing's going to happen. Promise me. Seth looked into her eyes, seeing the fear there, but also the fierce determination that had made him fall in love with her 5 years ago. I promise, he said, but you're going to be the one telling them yourself for the next 80 years. As they wheeled Eden toward the operating room, Seth walking alongside the gurney until the doors separated them, Eden felt a strange sense of peace. In a few hours, she would meet her sons. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever complications arose, they would face them together. All 4 of them. The operating room was a symphony of controlled chaos. Eden lay on the surgical table, a blue drape blocking her view of the procedure, while Dr. Chen worked with quiet efficiency behind the barrier. Seth sat beside her head, still wearing scrubs and a surgical mask, his hand gripping hers like a lifeline. Almost there, Dr. Chen called out. Baby A is crowning. Eden felt pressure, but no pain. The epidural doing its job perfectly. Still, her heart hammered against her ribs as she listened to the medical team's careful coordination. 29 weeks and 2 days. Their sons were about to enter a world they weren't quite ready for. Here he comes, Dr. Chen announced. A thin, reedy cry filled the operating room. Not the robust wail of a full-term baby, but a sound that was unmistakably alive, unmistakably fighting. Eden's eyes filled with tears as she heard her first son announcing his arrival to the world. Baby A is out, Dr. Chen said. 4 pounds 80. Good color, good cry. Eden tried to crane her neck to see, but the drape blocked her view. Is he okay? He's beautiful, Seth whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Eden, he's absolutely perfect. Before Eden could respond, the NICU team swept the baby away to their warming station. She caught only a glimpse, a tiny red form surrounded by medical equipment before they whisked him out of sight. And here comes baby B, Dr. Chen called. This one's taking his time. The second delivery took longer, and Eden could sense the increased tension in the room. Dr. Chen's commands became more clipped, more urgent. What's wrong? Eden asked. Baby B's cord is wrapped around his neck, Dr. Chen explained, her voice calm, but focused. We're working to get him out safely. Seth's grip on Eden's hand tightened, and she could see the fear in his eyes above his surgical mask. Come on, little guy, Dr. Chen murmured. Work with me here. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Eden found herself holding her breath, silently bargaining with the universe. She'd give up her career, her independence, anything, if both her sons could be healthy. Then finally, a second cry, weaker than his brother's, but present. Baby B is out, Dr. Chen announced. 4 pounds 3 ounces. He's going straight to NICU for observation, but he's breathing on his own. Breathing on his own, Eden repeated as if the words were a prayer. That's good, right? That's very good, Dr. Chen confirmed. Both boys are exceeding expectations for their gestational age. As the NICU team prepared to transport the second baby, a nurse approached Eden's head. Mom, would you like to see your sons before we take them upstairs? Eden nodded, not trusting her voice. The nurse adjusted the bed so Eden could see 2 tiny forms in portable incubators. They were smaller than she'd imagined, their skin translucent and delicate, but they were moving, their little chests rising and falling with determined breaths. They're so small, Eden whispered, but mighty, Seth said, his voice full of wonder. Look at them fight. Baby A, the larger of the 2, was moving restlessly in his incubator, his tiny fists waving in what looked like indignation at being removed from his warm, dark home. Baby B lay quieter, but his eyes were open, dark, and alert, as if he was taking in his new surroundings with serious consideration. They're so different already, Eden observed. Just like their parents, Dr. Chen said with a smile. Baby A is going to keep you on your toes. Baby B is going to be your thoughtful observer. Can I touch them? Eden asked. The NICU nurse nodded, guiding Eden's hand through the port of Baby A's incubator. Eden's finger touched her son's tiny palm, and immediately his miniature fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength. He knows you, Seth said softly. Eden's tears flowed freely now as she moved her other hand to Baby B's incubator. He didn't grip her finger like his brother, but when she touched his cheek, he turned his head slightly toward her touch. Hello, my beautiful boys," Eden whispered. "Mommy and Daddy love you so much. We need to get them upstairs now," the NICU nurse said gently. "But you'll be able to see them again in a few hours once you're recovered from surgery." As her sons were wheeled out of the operating room, Eden felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that they were alive and breathing, terror at how small and fragile they looked, and overwhelming love for these two tiny humans she'd only just met. "Dr. Chen," Seth said as the surgical team began closing Eden's incision, "what happens now? What should we expect?" "Now we take it day by day," Dr. Chen replied. 31-week babies typically spend 6 to 8 weeks in the NICU. They'll need help breathing, feeding, regulating their temperature. But Eden, these boys have something going for them that not all prees do. "What's that?" "They're fighters. I've delivered a lot of babies, and these two have the strongest will to live I've seen in a while." An hour later, Eden was in recovery, still groggy from anesthesia, but desperate to see her sons. Seth sat beside her bed, showing her photos on his phone that he'd taken in the NICU. "Baby A is already trying to pull out his breathing tube," Seth reported with a mixture of pride and concern. "The nurses say he's very determined, and baby B, quieter, but his oxygen levels are excellent. Dr. Martinez, the NICU attending, says both boys are doing better than expected for their gestational age." Eden studied the photos, her heart swelling with love and breaking with worry in equal measure. Her sons looked so small, surrounded by all the medical equipment, so vulnerable. "Seth," she said quietly, "what you asked me before about giving us another chance." Seth looked up from the phone, hope and fear warring in his expression. "I don't want to wait until they come home to give you my answer. Eden, you don't have to decide anything right now. You just had major surgery. You're worried about the babies. I want to decide now." Eden reached for his hand. "Seth Carrington, will you marry me?" Seth's eyes went wide. "What? You proposed to me 5 years ago. Now I'm proposing to you." Eden's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "Will you marry me? Will you be my husband and help me raise our sons and fight with me about whose turn it is to do laundry and love me even when I'm impossible?" Seth stared at her for a moment, then began to laugh, not from humor, but from pure joy. "Eden Morell, are you proposing to your ex-husband in a hospital recovery room?" "Yes, I am. And you're taking too long to answer." Seth leaned down and kissed her gently, carefully, mindful of her recent surgery. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with tears. "Yes," he said. "Yes to marrying you again. Yes to raising our sons together. Yes to arguing about laundry and loving you when you're impossible." He paused, his smile growing wider. "Yes to everything for the rest of our lives." Outside, snow began to fall over the city. The first snow of the new year. In the NICU, 3 floors above them, 2 tiny boys continued their fight to grow stronger, surrounded by the best medical care money could buy, but sustained by something more valuable: the absolute certainty that they were loved. Eden drifted off to sleep holding Seth's hand, the man who had carried an engagement ring for 11 months, who had never stopped wearing his wedding band, who had driven past her apartment for 3 months just to make sure her lights were on. When she woke up, they would go upstairs together to meet their sons properly. They would learn to navigate feeding tubes and breathing machines, celebrate ounces of weight gain and milestone achievements. They would spend long nights in the NICU, taking turns holding babies who fit in the palm of their hands. But for now, Eden slept peacefully, dreaming of a future where 4 became a family, where love conquered fear, and where 2 premature babies grew up knowing they had been wanted, fought for, and cherished from their very first breath. 18 months later, the sound of twin toddlers giggling echoed through the renovated brownstone in Brooklyn Heights as Eden chased 2 determined boys who had just learned the joys of walking and running in opposite directions. At 18 months old, Alexander James and Benjamin Seth Carrington were living proof that premature babies could not only survive, but thrive spectacularly. "Alex, no," Eden called as the larger twin made a beeline for the stairs. "Those are still off limits until you master going down them safely." Alexander, forever the troublemaker his NICU nurses had predicted, grinned over his shoulder with Seth's mischievous gray eyes before deliberately sitting down and attempting to scoot down the first step backward. His brother Benjamin watched from the safety of his play area, shaking his head with the serious expression that had earned him the nickname Little Professor from Jaime. "Need backup." Seth's voice came from the kitchen doorway where he stood holding a tray of cut fruit and wearing an apron that read, "World's Best Dad," a Father's Day gift from Eden that he wore with unexpected pride. "Please," Eden laughed. scooping up Alexander before he could execute his stair-sliding plan. Your son has decided that gravity is merely a suggestion. Wonder where he gets that from, Seth said, settling Benjamin on his lap, while Alexander immediately began trying to climb out of Eden's arms to investigate the interesting-looking electrical outlet nearby. The brownstone they'd chosen together was nothing like Seth's sterile penthouse or Eden's tiny first apartment. It was warm, lived in, with toys scattered across hardwood floors, finger paintings stuck to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets, and the comfortable chaos that came with raising twin toddlers. Seth's business had thrived under his new management style. He'd hired a crew to handle day-to-day operations while he focused on strategy and family time. Eden had started her own family law practice specializing in adoption and reproductive rights, working from a home office that allowed her to be present for every milestone. Mama Dada. Benjamin pointed excitedly toward the window. Uncle Jay. Sure enough, Jaime's car was pulling into the driveway with 5-year-old twins, Sophia and Isabella, practically bouncing in their car seats. The cousins had developed an intense mutual admiration society, with the older girls convinced that Alex and Ben were the most fascinating creatures on Earth. Are you ready for the chaos multiplier? Seth asked, settling Benjamin more securely on his lap. Are we ever ready? Eden replied, but she was smiling. These family gatherings had become the highlight of their lives. Loud, messy, perfect celebrations of how far they'd all come. The front door burst open without ceremony. Where are my favorite nephews? Jaime called, immediately swept up in enthusiastic hugs from Sophia and Isabella, who had inherited their father's gift for making everyone feel like the center of the universe. Uncle Seth, Sophia announced importantly. Daddy says you and Aunt Eden have news. Eden and Seth exchanged glances. They'd planned to wait until after dinner to share their announcement, but 5-year-olds were notoriously bad at keeping secrets, even ones they didn't know they knew. What kind of news? Eden asked innocently. The exciting kind, Isabella chimed in. Daddy was smiling funny in the car. Jaime appeared in the doorway looking sheepish. Sorry, they're very observant, just like their father, Seth said dryly. Remember when you announced Mom's pregnancy to the entire Christmas party when you were 6? I was excited, Jaime defended. And speaking of excitement, he looked meaningfully at Eden's still flat stomach. Alexander chose that moment to escape Eden's arms and toddle over to his uncle, babbling in the serious tone he used when he had important information to convey. Jaime scooped him up, listening intently to the gibberish as if it contained state secrets. He says, congratulations on the new baby, Jaime translated with a perfectly straight face. How could he possibly? Eden started, then stopped. How did you know? You're glowing. You turned down wine at dinner last week, and Seth has been researching cribs for singleton babies. Jaime grinned. Also, my daughters have supernatural powers when it comes to sensing family secrets. Sophia and Isabella cheered as if their detective skills had been officially recognized, while Benjamin clapped his hands in delight at the general excitement. How far along? Jaime asked more seriously. 12 weeks, Eden said, her hand moving instinctively to her still small bump. We wanted to make sure everything was okay before telling anyone. And is it okay? I mean, Seth moved to stand behind Eden, wrapping his arms around her waist. Perfect. Single baby. No complications so far. Due date in late summer when the boys will be almost 2. Irish twins, Jaime observed with amusement. You two don't do anything halfway, says the man who had actual twins on his first try. Seth replied, as if sensing they were the topic of conversation. Alexander and Benjamin began their evening routine of trying to communicate with each other in their twin language, a mixture of babbling and gestures that somehow made perfect sense to them, but sounded like adorable gibberish to everyone else. They're planning something, Eden said, watching her sons with the practiced eye of an experienced twin mother. That's their scheming conversation. Probably trying to figure out how to get into the cookie jar again, Seth said. Alexander figured out how to move the kitchen chair yesterday with Benjamin's engineering consultation. No doubt, Jaime added, watching the quieter twin gesture seriously toward the kitchen. The evening progressed with the beautiful chaos that had become their new normal. Dinner was a symphony of twin chatter, flying food, and patient cleanup. Bath time involved more water on the bathroom floor than in the tub. Bedtime required a carefully choreographed routine of stories, songs, and the precise arrangement of stuffed animals. Finally, after the boys were asleep and Jaime's family had headed home, Seth and Eden sat on their back porch, sharing a cup of decaffeinated tea and watching the stars. Do you ever think about that night? Eden asked softly. Christmas Eve when you showed up at my door. Seth was quiet for a moment, remembering. Every day, I think about how close I came to losing all of this. You, the boys, our family. What do you think would have happened if you hadn't come? I don't know, Seth admitted. Maybe eventually, one of us would have reached out about the babies. Maybe we would have found our way back to each other eventually. But I'm grateful we didn't have to find out. Eden leaned against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I'm grateful, too, for all of it. Even the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. Actually, why especially those? Because that's when we figured out who we really were. When you stopped trying to control everything, and I stopped trying to do everything alone. Eden placed her hand on her small bump. And now we get to do it all again. With 3 children under 2, Seth said. But he was smiling. We're officially insane. Officially happy, Eden corrected. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the city settling in tonight. Inside, their sons slept peacefully in their cribs. Alexander sprawled across his mattress like he was claiming territory. Benjamin curled up with his favorite stuffed elephant, both of them healthy and strong, and completely unaware that they'd been born too early. Seth thank you for what? For showing up, for fighting for us, for loving me enough to change, and trusting me enough to let me change, too. Eden looked up at him, her green eyes bright in the porch light. For giving me the family I didn't know I wanted. Seth kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the same lavender scent that had comforted him through months of hospital stays and sleepless nights with newborns. Thank you for saying yes, he said quietly both times. As they headed inside, Eden paused at the twins' bedroom door. Alexander and Benjamin slept soundly, their breathing deep and even, the same strong, determined breathing that had carried them through their first precarious months of life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, toddler tantrums, business decisions, pregnancy appointments, and the 1,000 small joys and frustrations of raising a family. But tonight, Eden felt nothing but gratitude for the winding path that had brought them here through separation and reconciliation, fear and hope, almost losing everything, only to discover they could build something even better than what they'd lost. Love, she'd learned, wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It was about showing up for each other, especially when showing up was the hardest thing in the world to do. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, showing up led to everything you never knew you wanted. Twin boys who turned your world upside down. A love that survived divorce and grew stronger for it. And a future that looked nothing like your plans, but everything like your dreams. In the quiet of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their beautifully chaotic life together, Eden and Seth fell asleep holding hands, already dreaming of the adventures their growing family would face together. Would you have had the courage to knock on that door on Christmas Eve, knowing everything could change forever? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.